What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, we're going to be talking about, did the Colts fill the biggest positions of need in the 2024 NFL Draft? But before we get going, just wanted to say this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Be sure to visit the PrizePicks app today and use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up. Guys, the NFL draft is pretty much 2 weeks out from now, and we've had some time to digest some of these things here. And we've been talking a lot about some positions of need for the Indianapolis Colts. And did they do something that would help to fix these positions? And we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. So, first things first, we'll talk about some of the draft picks in particular here. The first pick, with Latu, the Indianapolis Colts definitely added a crucial person to this defensive line unit. Again, everyone talks about this team had the fifth most sacks in the NFL last year. They had 50 of them. Why in the world could you possibly think that the Indianapolis Colts defensive line was a need? Well, if you just looked further into the numbers rather than just the sacks, you would see that when it came to overall pressure rate, the Indianapolis Colts were still a bottom tier defense when you looked at how often they were pressuring the quarterback. That's why we saw in several games last year, particularly quite a few of them at the end of the year, when the Colts were trying to put it away, some of the worst quarterbacks that we saw, even with some of the teams that had some of the worst offensive lines, sometimes they had guys that never got touched. Now, there's a lot more that goes into that. There is defensive game planning, offensive game planning, and a bunch of other things. But it showed that the Indianapolis Colts, they were able to take advantage of quite a few teams that had some bad offensive situations. But there were also a couple situations where they weren't able to take full advantage, or they had or they just had a couple guys that were injured that they were going against, and that helped them. And of course, they got roasted by people who either had good O-lines or good offensive game plans and just were not able to find anyone that could consistently get pressure on the quarterback. With Latu coming in now, you feel a whole lot better with this whole situation moving forward, not just this year, but in the coming years as well. Cody and I have been very adamant about it. The Kwity Paye contract has been through for a while now. Wasn't great last year against the pass. He really wasn't. He obviously finished the year with about 9 sacks. But again, when you look at the overall consistency of his pass rush, it wasn't great. So it's definitely one of those things that you need to try to continue to get better at those particular positions, particularly stopping the pass. If you can get after the pass rusher or after the passer majority of the time, you can be in a much better position. Again, this Colts defensive line, was it the biggest of needs? No, but it was 100% something that needed to be addressed and something that needs to be better than what it already is. So it was a great pick by the Indianapolis Colts to get someone like that to be able to go and basically boost this defensive line unit even more. And when you bring Charlie Partridge into it, I can only imagine what it's going to end up being like. Next thing here that we talked about, offensive weapons. That was something that we kept talking about in the draft, guys. The Colts really didn't bring a whole lot of offensive weaponry in free agency. Again, they obviously re-signed Michael Pittman, but you really didn't do a whole lot more than that. You signed a backup quarterback in Joe Flacco, but that's the only thing you did offensively. So you come in now and you're thinking, well, we have to get some kind of weapon to help boost this offensive unit, even though we think it's going to get better when it gets healthy and when it gets another year older. But the Indianapolis Colts went and got not only a great weapon, but one of the best weapons in the draft offensively, and that was Adonai Mitchell in the second round. Again, guys, no one is saying that Adonai Mitchell is a bad player, not even close. And everyone will tell you that the potential of an Adonai Mitchell is through the roof, which obviously gives a lot of people extreme confidence and a lot of hype about this pick. So obviously the Colts went out and got an explosive playmaker that could do some great things for you if used properly. Now, also you can add Anthony Gold to that mix. From an offensive perspective, will not be as beneficial as Adonai Mitchell. But of course, like we said, with an offensive weapon, you can utilize that in the return game. That's what he's being utilized for, mainly his ability to return the kicks. And that's a blessing to have. So again, the Colts went out and got some really great weapons offensively, especially for this upcoming season. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, college basketball, other entries like that today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So, for example, for basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game and does not return in the second half of a game, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays alive. As you guys obviously know, NBA playoffs are going on right here, right now. Of course, I'm following the Pacers and the Knicks very, very closely. As far as some totals here, I will definitely be taking the less on any points that Halliburton is projected during this series. Hasn't really been going well for him. Hasn't really been scoring a lot over the last few series. So I will definitely be going under on Tyrese Halliburton for points. I will, however, be taking the more opportunity there for Josh Hart. Had some really great games. I look for him to continue to keep scoring. I'm going to keep going with more on point totals for him. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Another thing that we didn't really address a ton because it wasn't the bigger needs, but again, it was a need nonetheless that the Colts needed to figure out, and that was offensive line depth. Now, obviously, you had quite a few tackles still available here, but when you had your guys, your starting rotation, you still have Blake Freeling, you still have Jake Witt coming back from injury. So you have some tackle depth out there, but you also went and drafted a guy in Matt Gonsalves that ended up actually, being a tackle in college, but you think now could potentially move into guard if you wanted to go that route. And you also went with Tanner Bortolini, who is also an interior guy, center, very good center guy, athletic, smart. Both these guys very smart, very committed to their craft. So you took back-to-back picks here, and you went with guys that you feel like you're going to put on the interior of your offensive line. But you have guys who can stretch out, who are position flexible, which is a very good thing for the Indianapolis Colts. It wasn't the biggest of needs out there, but the Indianapolis Colts did go and bring in quality offensive line depth in the middle rounds of this draft who are going to go in there and are going to be able to compete. They're not going to win over any jobs right away, but they are going to be guys that can fill out the depth that you need in the interior of this offensive line. And then the last thing that we can talk about, and this was actually a position that really didn't get much of a change through this draft class, and it is the cornerback, or if you want to say it, the secondary depth. Secondary wise, we didn't really think that there was going to be a lot of safeties per se in this draft that Ballard was going to get that was going to immediately take over, because we saw Julian Blackmon's there now. We've heard the Indianapolis Colts names tied to a couple of free agent safeties in the market still. Some guys that still could be brought over through free agency, because again, guys, there's a lot of time still left before training camp. But as far as the cornerback depth goes, we're wondering if the Indianapolis Colts were going to take a cornerback in the first round. That was a question mark, but they opted not to, and they didn't get a cornerback even in the mid rounds quite a bit. It wasn't until the later rounds where they started going for those hybrid safety corner linebacker guys that maybe a couple guys could potentially fit in. But as far as guys that are going to actually be corners, if Jalen Simpson moves over to corner, I don't know how he becomes even the fifth corner in this roster. And then for as far as Mike Abraham to be in there, I mean, he'll obviously be a backup to Kenny Moore, but I mean, how much time is he actually going to get? So as far as a secondary help, there really wasn't a ton that the Indianapolis Colts did to fix the secondary. You can't always fix every position on this team. There was a lot of different situations that we talked about where the Indianapolis Colts needed to fix themselves, and the corner and the secondary in particular was just one they didn't attend to as much. So it is what it is. I mean, you can't fix everyone. Hopefully that we see something in free agency done that makes you think that the Indianapolis Colts will try to do better with fixing a little bit of their group. I'd imagine that the Colts will probably still look to get something in the safety room, but we'll see how that goes, guys. But thank you guys so much. Let me know your thoughts on, did the Indianapolis Colts fill their biggest positions of need? Was there another position that you wanted to have them fill that I didn't mention? Was there something else that you felt that they did do that they didn't, or didn't do that you wanted them to? All of that stuff. But let me know your thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.